I'm here at the Utica State Office building to interview Senator Joe Griffo. Senator, thank you so much for coming on the show. I can't believe it's been this long and you haven't been on my show yet. I feel like I've gotten around to everybody else, and now
well, that's
here we are.
okay. You know, they say the first shall be last and the last shall be first.
Absolutely. Let's hope this is the best one yet. Let's talk about the election. When this is posted, the election will be tomorrow. Your message to people on the importance of voting, even in more local elections and local races. Why is it important?
You know, this is an essential part of our democracy. It's what we are all about. And you need to be engaged. It's a privilege that we're afforded to in this country. And it is imperative that people not only participate, but also educate themselves as to who the candidates are and what they represent. And equally as important is the ballot proposals that are on the ballot many times every year. And people just sometimes forget to turn it over. I mean, we've seen changes in our voting systems, right? We were in a machine that had a curtain at one point in time, with a lever machine, they called it.
Oh, yeah.
And now we've moved to the scanners. So it's a little easier now in the sense that you can just turn a ballot over. Before, you could read it all in front of you. But I think a lot of people tend to forget. And so it's imperative that people become aware of what's on and formulate opinion, do their homework, and vote. So yes, this is, to me, it represents everything that we are as a nation. This is what makes us so special across the globe, that we have these elections where people can make a determination and decision on who will lead them. And we do it in a way that we've always had a peaceful transfer of power too, from the local level to the federal level. And it's imperative at the local level that you do get out and make a decision, because those are the offices, as a former mayor, those are the offices that have the most impact on your daily lives. So they're the most accessible. They're the individuals that you can reach easily, and that is the quality of life that you're living each and every day. So there are big issues at the state and federal level that people have an opinion on and engage in debate or conversation. But the local level, it really gets down to providing the services that people really need and are accustomed to, whether it's public safety or public transportation, parks and recreation, public works, all of the things that are important as you live your everyday life. So that's why it's imperative that local races get the same kind of attention and engagement as you would in a presidential year.
Absolutely. You talked about those ballot proposals, and you've come out in opposition to at least one of them. I'm not sure about some of the others. But if you could talk about your views on those ballot proposals and why you think it's important, particularly on the redistricting one, that people vote no.
So yeah, there's a number of propositions this year, and there's 5 of them. The 5th one is on a New York City court system, so I think it's really have to follow the basically the will of the city in this case, because it affects them. So it's kind of a home rule kind of situation, we call that in the legislature. But here it's them asking to do something that they want to change in the city. So I respect that, because they have to know what they want to do and how they want to do it, and I yield to them in that regard. The Second Amendment is kind of an interesting one, because it's the creation of a constitutional right to a clean environment, to clean air and water, and who doesn't want that? I believe in clean air and water. The problem I have is that once it becomes in the Constitution, how are you going to uphold that? We have a number of things in the Constitution right now that are ignored. And to me, that sends the wrong message to people. When you're encouraging people to get involved and engaged in their government, then to say, well, we passed this thing, but then we ignore it. That's wrong. So that's why I don't believe that I don't think we're ready for this right now. If you're going to incorporate something, how then are you going to make it work? I'll give you another illustration. There's a part of the Constitution where it guarantees a certain percentage of revenue sharing with the localities. It hasn't been followed for generations, and yet it exists. And I'm one of those individuals that believes if it's not working, change it, or if it's something that can't work, then get rid of it. But to keep something there and then to ignore it, I think it just sends the wrong message. So that one I would say I'm reluctant to support for that reason. Proposition 3 is on registration. And I understand right now there's a deadline, and when you miss it, you can't vote. And that can be challenging sometimes because people forget, even though I think we give a lot of ample opportunity to register in different places at different times. What I'm concerned with in this is that it also gives the legislature the ability then to tweak whatever the people decide. If they say, yes, we can shorten the period, then ultimately the legislature decides what that period is. I do not support same-day registration because I believe it would be a nightmare, and we've seen this in our Board of Elections. We don't provide them with the resources, we give them more mandates, and then we wonder why sometimes it's so confusing and why they're facing so many challenges in trying to conduct an election the way we expect them to do so. So my concern is if you go to a same-day registration, it's going to be a nightmare from a logistical perspective, but also from the integrity of the vote. Because you want to protect and preserve at all costs the integrity of the vote. And that's my concern there, that if you go to same day, it's a problem. Proposition 4, no excuse absentee balloting, I support that. In fact, I carried a bill to allow that. The problem I have with it is that right now, the way the system works, you have to request a ballot for an absentee ballot. You have to request a ballot. I agree with that. I don't believe they should just be sent indiscriminately because I think, again, that poses a potential threat to the integrity of the system. Unless you are somebody who's documented that you are infirmed and you want a ballot sent each year, that's fine. But in this case, it leaves it open-ended. So while I support no excuse absentee balloting, I'm concerned that the legislature, again, may go in and tweak this and say, well, now we'll just randomly send ballots out. And I, from my own experience, do not believe that is a good way to do this. I think it's not a lot to ask for somebody to request a ballot, even if it's in perpetuity, to explain why you want that ballot, and then to receive the ballot.
I don't mean to cut you off before you get to Proposition 1, but just a little bit more specifically, how on Proposition 4 would sending out the ballots to registered voters affect the integrity of the ballot if it's the same list that you're seeing at polls on election day?
Well, it is and it isn't, in the sense that an absentee right now is based upon condition, right? You're out of state on work or you're ill and you ask for a ballot. And that's the process right now. You request a ballot. So I believe that process works. I would have to do more research. I'm not comfortable with just complete mail balloting right now because I believe there's potential hazard there. Harvesting is one example of that, where somebody can go around and just take the ballots, because some people, as you had indicated early in the interview, say, well, I got the ballot, I don't know if I'm going to vote. But then and there's nothing illegal about this, I just think it attacks the integrity of the system, right? That you could walk around and just say, I'm going to go to the senior apartment complex and say, did you vote? No. Well, I'll bring your ballot for you, or mail your ballot for you. You fill it out and I'll mail it. And in some instances, it turns out like, well, I'm not sure what I want to do, So I just think, we have a system that works.
If you took it from someone and said that you were going to deliver it, you'd have a legal obligation to deliver it.
Well, that's not always the case. You do have that legal obligation, but there have been cases where things don't get mailed, Sure. And I'm just saying that I don't think it's a lot for you to ask for, say, I want to vote, and I just want it by mail, and then send that in. That's not a hard thing to do. I mean, we do that for periodicals and stuff. Mm-hmm. I mean, so to me, again, it goes to the essence of voting. And again, it's a philosophic difference. Some people will disagree, saying, I just think we should send a ballot out to everybody who's registered. Well, some people may have passed away and they may still be on the rolls because they're not always purged. There are a lot of irregularities that take place from time to time. Some of it unintentional because, like I said, there are things that happen. And technology is helping, but also could be challenging because there's more attempts. I think the old lever machine was actually probably more secure than some of the newer things. Now in New York, I think we have a system that works with the optical scanners and everything, but in some cases where you're voting by computer. See, to me, this is so precious a privilege that we've got to get it right, because that's what we're all about. And we believe in these things, right? We believe that we have fair elections, that we can get it done, even though mistakes can be made and there have been irregularities from time to time. But we don't want this to become to what we witness and see in other countries where we have to send moderators to go in. Former President Carter had to do that in several countries, who went in with a team to make sure that the elections were being conducted properly and fairly. We don't want to get that to in a place like that. We've never had that in over 200 years of our history. So that's why I think some of these small things, like saying, you want an absentee ballot? Sure, ask for it, and you should get it for no reason. You don't have to say I'm sick or I'm out of town on business, but ask for it. That's my own personal opinion.
Yeah. Proposition 1. I know that you've been very vocal in opposition to that.
So Proposition 1 is a redistricting proposal. And you know, this was a system fraught with gerrymandering by both parties for a long time. In particularly in our state, where we had divided government, which I believe worked for the people of New York because it forced consensus and we delivered results accordingly. However, now we have one party control, one region domination. So 2010, around that time period, right after that, after the census. And I also believe that this year, more than any year, the census is more in question than it ever should or has been because of COVID and the conditions, COVID conditions. It's always difficult to get the census done the way it needed to and should be done when so much rests upon that information. And then to think that, and last year I pleaded with the Department of the Census Bureau and the Department of Commerce and the members of Congress to say, maybe we should move this back for one time. These are extraordinary times, and we should maybe get this right because it's going to mean so much for so many. So after 2010, there was a uproar, as there has been, saying, why don't we change this? Why don't we move away from gerrymandering, designing these district lines in both Congress and in the legislature for political gain and purpose, and really try to do it in a different way. Now, more recently, after 2010, the courts actually had to get involved because it looked like it was too political. But that's not always the case. So there was a proposition put forth, passed in a Republican Senate and a Democrat Assembly, signed by a Democrat governor, put before the people of the state of New York, because that's how we amend our Constitution. It passes 2 different terms of the legislature and gets the signature of the governor. And then the people vote, and they voted overwhelmingly to support this change. So we haven't even begun that change, and we're already now tweaking it. So this new Proposition 1 is they say they're tweaking this for the benefit, but to me it's going to neuter what was originally done and allow ultimately lines to be drawn politically again. Some illustrations of that, and this is where we get in the weeds, and it's tough sometimes for people to grasp, and that's why I encourage people to educate themselves. Currently, it would require, out of this independent redistricting commission, there are minority and majority members, but it requires a couple of members of the minority in order to present a report to be on board, which I think is a good check and balance. Yeah. The new one doesn't have that requirement. The old version requires a 2/3 vote of the legislature to accept. The new version requires 60%. In the Senate, that could be 8 votes. That's a lot. You know what I mean? Just that small percentage. People don't read, like, well, what's the difference? 2/3, 60. Another thing is, and this bothers me because this is what we want to avoid at all costs. Presently, you can divide cities. I don't agree with that, but it exists. But under the new proposal, you can divide the city block. So right here on Genesee Street behind us, there's a block where the hotel, the Bank of Utica is. And then there's Nicholas Jewelers and LASIX Opticals. You could technically split that where the Bank of Utica is in one district and LASIK Optical and Nicholas Jewelers are in another. It's not good for representation. And now you cannot divide a town. You live in a town, New Hartford?
Yep.
You can't divide New Hartford right now. Under this proposal, you can divide the town of New Hartford, which I think would be wrong too. And beyond that, it does something that I have no problem with, but I disagree with. It sets constitutionally the number of senators at 63. And a lot of people embrace that, saying, yeah, you don't want to pick and choose how many senators. The Assembly is set by number in the Constitution, 150. The Senate is not. And it has been used politically, sometime more, but I believe there should be less. And I actually have a proposal that would reconfigure the whole legislature. I don't believe in the divide New York theory, even though I believe there are unique differences and challenges that exist. I think I have a better proposal, which would follow the federal model and basically say that the Assembly would be based upon population and the Senate would be based on 62 members, 62 counties, every county gets a senator. Similar to the US Constitution, where Wyoming has 2 US senators and 1 congressman, and California has over 50 congresspersons and 2 US senators. Our forefathers were brilliant when they came up with that compromise, back in the 18th century. We should do something like that. That would provide immediate, in my opinion, geographic balance. People think it's a partisan ploy to get more Republicans. There's no guarantee Onondaga County is going to elect a Republican, or Monroe County, or Erie County, or Oneida County for that matter. But it will present a more upstate perspective. So the people who want to cut the state in two, this accomplishes it in a more reasonable, realistic fashion, in my opinion. So we're going back to the 63 members, and I want to bring, it says under this proposal, Prop 1, it would be 63. I say, why does it have to be 63? We may want to bring it down to 60 or 62 in my case. So those are the reasons that I believe this is not a good proposal and we should vote no. And along with me, so there's not just a elected official who is a Republican saying this, you now have good government groups like Common Cause, the League of Women Voters, the Business Council of the state of New York saying, this is bad, let's give it a chance the way the people said they wanted to see it, and then we'll determine whether it's got to be tweaked or not. To me, this is an effort to neuter what was already done and to position it so that we could end up with more partisan gerrymandering again, but with a more formal ability to do so because it's under the guise of a nonpartisan commission.
Yeah. I want to thank you so much for sitting down for the interview. I really appreciate it, and we'll speak again soon.
I appreciate the time.
Thank you.